Hi everyone, and welcome to our Structured Observation Best Practice series. These recordings are designed to support planning of the structured observations to help your students achieve the highest marks they can. They should be watched alongside the professional discussion video series that you can already find on our playlist and assessor Padlets. So you may know me, I'm Gemma McGregor, Provider Development Officer for Education and Early Years T-Level at NCFE, and I'm joined by my colleague and very experienced moderator, Laura Robshaw. Please note that these recordings relate to Generation 1, Assignment 2, Part 2, and that the moderation window is the 2nd of February to the 15th of May 2026. So let's begin with Structured Observation 1 for Early Years Educator. So SO1 is about supporting children's learning and development. The activity descriptor states that the activity will assess the student's ability to support children's learning and development, making use of planned and unplanned opportunities. There are 9 criteria to meet here, all of which are worth up to 4 marks each. In this short video, we're going to talk through each of the criteria and share some of the top tips when planning for this. These should be watched in conjunction with the professional discussion video series. So now I'm going to hand over to Laura for a summary first of Structured Observation 1. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. So for Structured Observation 1, we find that the best planning for this observation are ones where students choose to cover a literacy session. They'll include planned and spontaneous maths within that literacy. Students that achieve higher marks carefully select stories to help students to meet as much of the criteria as possible. For example, ones that might include some phonics, some maths, and discussions around feelings and emotions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Laura. Do you have any that you could share?
We've seen lots and lots of fantastic observations for Structured Observation 1, and I think we're always hesitant to share examples as we believe this should be planned in line with children's individual needs and interests and linked to what they're doing at placement settings. So what we've seen works best is when they might link it to the story of the week, for example, or linking to key themes and festivals like Valentine's, World Book Day, Eid, Easter, etc. The higher marks include students becoming creative and combining activities together. So they might then read a story and then carry out a follow-up activity within that time frame. So some examples include where a student might read, say, something like Red Riding Hood and then go off and bake some biscuits. So then they're doing all the pouring, the mixing, the measuring, and really involving maths within that activity. Another good ones that we've seen are things like Goldilocks, where they then do the story, the literacy, but also then the understanding of size, concepts, and where they differentiate based on children's development and next steps. We've also seen things like Going on a Bear Hunt, where they incorporate mathematical concepts throughout. So lots of popular stories, but not wanting to think that that's all you can use. Just be creative, work with the settings, see what they're doing there, and do as much as you can. When looking at S129 for higher marks, students should try to plan for as much of the assessed skills as possible. For example, storytelling, phonics, songs and rhymes. They need to be observed implementing these and ensuring that interactions are purposeful. And then to achieve the 4 marks, students must demonstrate that the strategies are differentiated. So this is where the individual planning becomes crucial. Make sure that they're included in the plan which children they plan to use, know exactly what they intend to teach each child, and link it to the development statements to develop where that child is at. A professional discussion is allowed here to complement that understanding, but this should be to discuss any assessed skills or strategies that we weren't able to observe.
Wow, that's fantastic, Laura. Thank you for some lovely examples there and stories that will be familiar to a lot of us as well. That's great. So obviously then planning is absolutely crucial, really, isn't it, to ensure that a range of strategies are used to support literacy. And students do not need to repeat these in the discussion what was observed, do they?
No, they don't.
Excellent. So now what about criteria 1.2 and 1.3?
Okay, so for 1.2 and 1.3, which was previously 1.1, if you're looking at the professional discussion videos, this is where you should include expected patterns of behaviour, expected patterns of development, within their plan against the areas listed. Activities should be age stage appropriate based on the individual needs and interests of the child. In the discussion, students are expected to share significant milestones contextualised to their own activity that they've just carried out and share how they might adapt that for younger and older children up to 7. Common mistakes here are where students tend to discuss how they might amend an activity, such as use an easier book, but they then don't link that to significant milestones, which is important to demonstrate their understanding. Assessors are reminded that students should have covered all of this for part 1, so therefore for part 2, they should really focus on contextualising to the planned activity to demonstrate their knowledge. Marks don't necessarily have to be lost if all areas are not covered, providing the contextual response provides enough depth in that response, and assessor match their justifications to what information is being given.
Okay, that's really helpful. So could students just focus on some key children here and talk through their developmental stages?
Yeah, the criteria is to know the expected patterns of development, so that would work. They just need to ensure for higher marks that they cover all the required information in the marking bands, such as theory, individual rate and pace, how adults can support holistic development, as well as to refer to patterns of typical development, so that would work well with a particular child. Are they developing as they should? Are there any areas of need? Do they need any additional support, and what factors might affect their development? Students who contextualise to real practice, so they might talk about a particular child that they've had in their group, really tend to demonstrate a much deeper understanding. They can explain which theories they've informed their decisions and how they've applied these, and it provides evidence of strong professional knowledge.
So if students include all of that in their plan, then Laura, is that enough?
No, students should use the information in the plan and share it in the discussion to demonstrate that understanding. Assessors should encourage them to use that plan to drive the professional discussion forward.
Okay, thank you. So now let's look at 1.7, 1AH. What do students need to consider for this?
So looking at this one, it is new for this year. So last year it was known as 1.4. For this year, it is 1.71 AH. So it's about analysing and explaining how cultural background and family circumstances can impact on babies and children, learning and development. So there is that real focus on cultural and family circumstances. The best responses are again where children talk about the children that the students talk about the children that they're working with and factors that might affect their development. And assessors can encourage this from their own observations. For example, I noticed you had a child with EAL. How might that affect their learning and development? Students should be reminded that they need to analyse and explain the impact for higher marks, specifically identifying which area of learning and development this might relate to. And for higher marks, they must make reference to theory or statutory guidance such as the EYFS to consider approaches to inclusion and diversity.
Okay, so when considering approaches to inclusion and diversity, then remembering that this is a specific thing to this criteria and how they support inclusion rather than generalised.
Yeah, so examples include about if children are living in poverty, how do they support inclusive practice around that? For example, having breakfast club for all children, or books and resources and home learning for all children, and how they support equality and rather than how they support equality and diversity more generally. So not about the displays and the books in this particular in this particular area.
That makes total sense. Thanks, Laura. So just to make clear, information shared for 1.2, 1.3 and 1.7 can all be marked holistically, so there's no need to repeat the content for each. So the next criteria we're looking at is mathematical development. So S1.30, which is demonstrate flexibility during planned activities to incorporate unplanned opportunities when supporting children's mathematical development. And S1.31, which is using observational assessments to identify children's mathematical skills and foster these skills through play and structured opportunities. So how would you suggest students prepare for these?
So S130 is observation only and about incorporating unplanned maths. Marks are often lost here either because students do not include any unplanned mathematical opportunities, or the opportunities they do provide are planned and then therefore they must be marked against S131. It's important to note that when mathematical opportunities are included, they're sometimes quite basic, so students should be encouraged to ensure that there's a certain level of challenge as well for the age and stage of children. And then for S131, students need to carry out at least one or more observations of children, and best practice is to do this prior to the assessment, so then they can make links to the EYFS and clear next steps. These should then feed into the planning, showing that differentiation. Examples including carrying out an observation of a child's, say, number skills, and then planning a range of opportunities to build on counting, say, up to 10, and number recognition. Students should be observed being highly effective in supporting extending children's mathematical skills, and best practice examples including children having to find a certain number based on their development, for example. So if they've done an observation before and they know a child can only count to 5, they might consolidate that up to 5, but then plan up to 10. If they know in their group that some children might know higher than 10, then they would differentiate asking those children to count higher. Or another example might be where if they're doing something, they'll say, right, can you go and find me 3 things to bring back? Can you go and find me 4? They'll differentiate based on the ability of the children that's been informed by their observations. They can still achieve marks for S131, but all of the mathematical concepts such as shape, size, position, or language would be unplanned. So it's knowing this is planned, marks again S131, I'm basing it on number, and then the spontaneous would be all the other things such as size, position, or language, as I mentioned.
That makes total sense. And I think it's that point, isn't it, between the planned and unplanned, getting that differentiation right and making sure that you know which is which for which criteria. That's great. So just to recap then, these criteria should be considered together to ensure that there are opportunities for both planned and unplanned maths. And assessors really do need to ensure that they're marking appropriately, using those marking bands. Can they use a professional discussion here, Laura?
They can discuss how they've used observation to support and extend children's mathematical skills.
Brilliant, thank you. So we know that S123, engaging strategies to develop and extend children's learning and thinking, is in all of the structured observations, isn't it? So do you have any tips for this?
Just to achieve the higher marks, students should plan to demonstrate as many of the assessed skills as possible. It should link to the planning of children's individual needs and how they're differentiating to extend children's learning and thinking, and students should be observed utilising all opportunities.
Brilliant, thank you. So moving on to S125, which is support and promote children's speech, language and communication development using a range of strategies. How can students prepare for that one?
Yeah, and again, planning is crucial to ensure they can demonstrate as many of the assessed skills as possible, using visual aids, using bilingual resources where appropriate, modelling that language, asking appropriate questioning for the age and the stage, giving children time to respond, using songs, using rhymes, and using storytelling. A discussion is allowed, but this should only cover anything that's not observed and for them to link to the current curriculum. Marks are often lost where students might refer to the curriculum in general terms rather than in direct relation to speech, language and communication. And for higher marks, this should really be looking at references to theory and current research around language development again.
Okay, that makes total sense. Thanks, Laura. And lastly, for this observation, we have S2.19, which is model and encourage positive behaviours expected of children, and S2.20, support children to manage their own behaviour in relation to others. And these are also in all 3 observations. So do you have any tips for these last 2?
Yes, so students tend to perform well in S219 where they're modelling positive behaviour and share behaviour expectations before the activity, ensuring they implement the settings, behaviour strategies and any reward systems. Assessors sometimes mix up marks for this with S220 and overlapping evidence. However, for S220, students need to be observed actively listening to the children and questioning them to support verbalisation of feelings. So this is where that effective use of stories comes back to help generate those discussions. So then they can make links to their own feelings and emotions, encouraging them to problem solve, to effectively manage their own emotions and deal with behaviour in relation to others. So this has been seen effectively, for example, through the use of stories like the Gruffalo, how he might feel if when he's all alone, and what would they do if a child within that setting was alone, how might they help them? So it's getting them to think about those in scenario based. If it doesn't happen naturally, which sometimes for S219 and S220, if there isn't a behaviour incident, then that can sometimes affect marks. So it's them being proactive, plan. How can they really support that?
Fantastic. I think that's one of the key words here, isn't it? Planning is key. Planning is really important. Thank you so much, Laura. There's loads to consider there. I think the main parts that I take from this is for students to consider which children they'll work with and complete observations with, so they can feed their next steps into their planning with clear links, as you said before, to the EYFS. They really do need to be working in partnership with mentors at their placement to ensure that stories or plans relate to individual needs and interests, and use the tutor guide as well, just to ensure that you're covering all of those assessed skills. For assessors and tutors, look over plans against the tutor guide to ensure all assessed skills and higher marking bands have been covered, and provide timely and useful feedback for your students as well. On the day, students need to be reminded to use those plans in professional discussions, and assessors should use these too, and additional further questioning to ensure higher marking band responses can be captured. So that's been really useful. Thank you so much to all of you watching the video today, and we hope you found it useful too. Please do share feedback and suggestions. There'll be a link in the comments for you to do that once this is live, and we hope to see you for the next in the video series.